There's this guy I know who spent 7 years grinding to save his first $100,000. 7 years. Living with roommates at 32. Driving a Honda Civic from 2006. Packing lunches while his coworkers ordered seamless every day. Then one morning, he checks his account and sees 6 figures for the first time in his life. And you know what his first thought was? Quote, only 9 more of these to go. He did the math in his head. 7 years times 9. 63 more years of this discipline, he'd be 94 years old. He literally started looking at new apartments that same week. Here's the problem. His math was completely wrong. And that mistake, that one misunderstanding about how wealth actually accumulates, is why most people with 6 figures in the bank never make it to 7. They quit right before the exponential curve kicks in. They're standing at the bottom of a roller coaster, looking up at the first hill, assuming the whole ride is going to be that slow climb. But compound interest doesn't work like climbing a hill. It works like a snowball rolling down a mountain. And if you bail out before gravity takes over, you miss the entire point. So here's what we're doing today. I'm going to show you the exact math behind why your first $100,000 is psychologically brutal, but mathematically critical. Why $650,000 is the real inflection point where everything changes. And why the jump from 1 million to 2 million happens faster than 0 to 100,000, which sounds impossible, but is just how exponential math works. By the time we're done, you'll understand exactly why Einstein allegedly called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. And more importantly, why most people never actually experience that wonder because they tap out during the boring part. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan. And I only ask for your email to send the report so I don't store any of your financial data. Link in the description. Think about a snowball for a second. You're at the top of a mountain. You pack together a handful of snow, maybe the size of a softball. You start rolling it. First rotation. It picks up basically nothing. The surface area is tiny. You're doing all the work pushing this thing, and it's barely growing. Second rotation, same thing. Still tiny, still pathetic. You look down the mountain and think, at this rate, this is going to take forever. But you keep pushing because what else are you going to do? By rotation 10, something starts to shift. The snowball is now basketball sized. It's got more surface area. Each rotation picks up a little more snow than the last. By rotation 20, it's beach ball size and you're not pushing as hard because momentum is starting to help. By rotation 50, the thing is massive, picking up entire sheets of snow with each turn, and you're just trying to keep up with it. That's compound interest. The first 100 rotations feel pointless. The last 100 rotations create 90% of the total mass. Your investment account works exactly the same way. The painful part is nobody tells you which rotation you're on. You're out there pushing your softball-sized snowball thinking you're still on rotation 3 when you're actually on rotation 47 and about to hit the acceleration point. So people quit. They stop pushing. They cash out to buy a nicer car or a bigger house. And the snowball stops growing right before it would have started rolling on its own. Let me give you the actual numbers because this is where it gets interesting. Let's say you're investing $500 a month into a boring S&P 500 index fund. 7% annual returns, which is conservative based on inflation-adjusted historical data going back to 1926. Not some crypto fantasy, not some stock-picking genius move, just automated deposits into VTI or VOO. Year 1, you contribute $6,000 total. With returns, you end with about $6,200. Your returns for the entire year, $200. You sacrificed $500 a month, said no to dinners and trips and upgrades, and the market gave you $200. Your coworker bought a Peloton and seems fine. This is the part where most people's conviction starts cracking. They're thinking, I'm doing everything right and I'm barely moving. Year 5, you've contributed $30,000 total. Account balance is around $36,000. You've earned $6,000 from compound growth. Better than nothing, sure, but you're still doing all the heavy lifting. The returns feel like a tip, not a salary. You're still on rotation 15 of the snowball. Year 10, 60,000 contributed. Account balance 87,000. You've earned 27,000 from returns. Now we're getting somewhere. But you're looking at that number thinking, cool, so I need to do this for another 30 years? Here's where people make the fatal mistake. They look at how long it took to reach their first 100,000 and assume linearly. They think, took me 10 years to get 100,000, so 200,000 is year 20. 300,000 is year 30. And that math makes them want to quit because who wants to wait 30 years to hit 300,000? But that's not how it works. From 100,000 to 200,000 takes about 7 more years with the same 500 monthly contribution. From 200,000 to 300,000, 5 years. From 300,000 to 400,000, 4 years. The time between each $100,000 milestone starts compressing because the snowball is getting bigger. Your returns are compounding on increasingly larger bases. There's a story about a chess master and a king. The king offers the chess master any reward for winning a match. The chess master says, I want 1 grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard, 2 grains on the second square, 4 on the third, doubling each square. The king laughs because it sounds modest. 1 grain, 2 grains, whatever. The king's advisors frantically try to stop him because they understand exponential math. By square 64, the king owes 18 quintillion grains of rice. More rice than exists on Earth. That's the power of doubling. That's what compound interest is doing to your account. The first squares feel like nothing. The last squares are absurd. Now, you're asking yourself, okay, but when do I actually feel this? Great question. The first major psychological shift happens at $100,000. Here's why this number matters. At 7% returns, a $100,000 portfolio generates about $7,000 per year in growth. That's more than you're contributing annually at $500 per month. For the first time in your journey, your money is working as hard as you are. Actually harder, because that $7,000 shows up whether you're sleeping, on vacation, or binge watching Netflix. Your contributions still matter, but the returns are now pulling serious weight. This is rotation 50 on the snowball. You're not pushing alone anymore. But here's the trap. Some people hit 100,000 and think, I made it. They ease off contributions. They treat themselves. They don't realize they just built the launch pad but haven't launched yet. Other people hit 100,000 and do the linear math wrong, assume the next 100,000 will take just as long, and get discouraged. Both groups quit right before things get interesting. The second inflection point is $650,000. This is where compound interest stops being a cool theory and becomes financially life-changing. At 8% returns, a $650,000 portfolio generates $52,000 per year. At 7%, that's $45,500 annually. The median household income in the United States right now is about $70,000. Your portfolio is generating 65 to 75% of what the median American household earns by working full-time. Your money, just sitting there, is earning nearly what most people trade 40 hours a week for. I watched this happen to a friend who runs a small accounting firm. He hit $600,000 in his taxable brokerage and retirement accounts combined around age 49. He didn't quit his job, but his entire psychology around work shifted. His boss, who'd been making his life miserable for years, suddenly had no power. My friend could walk away tomorrow, and his portfolio would cover most of his expenses while he figured out what's next. So he started saying no. No to weekends. No to scope creep. No to degrading comments in meetings. And you know what happened? His boss backed off because my friend stopped acting like someone who needed the job. The power dynamic flipped entirely. That's what $650,000 buys you. Options. Not full financial independence, but the psychological freedom that comes from having a viable exit. This is also where market crashes become your friend instead of your enemy, which sounds insane, but follow the math. You've got $650,000 and you're still contributing $500 a month. Market drops 20%. Your portfolio temporarily falls to 520,000. That's painful to watch. But here's what's actually happening. Your $500 monthly contributions are now buying shares at a 20% discount. Every month during the crash, you're buying stocks on sale. And historically, not sometimes, not usually, but always, the market recovers given enough time. The people who kept contributing through 2008, buying at the bottom, ended up with dramatically better returns than people who started investing in 2010 after the recovery was underway. Why? Because they bought shares at Black Friday prices for 18 months while everyone else was panicking. There's an old parable about a farmer during a famine. Everyone else is hoarding grain, refusing to plant because they're terrified they'll lose their seed and have nothing. The farmer plants anyway. He figures, yeah, if the famine continues, I'm screwed. But if it ends, I'll have a massive harvest while everyone else is scrambling to get seed. The famine ends. The farmer becomes wealthy. That's what buying during crashes is. Planting when everyone else is hoarding. Third inflection point is $1 million. At 7%, a $1 million portfolio generates $70,000 annually. At 8%, $80,000. Your portfolio is now earning more than the median household income from doing absolutely nothing. But here's where the exponential curve goes vertical. From 0 to 1 million took you about 29 years in our example. From 1 million to 1.5 million, 6 more years. Not 29, not 15, 6. You just added 50% to your net worth in 1/5 the time it took to build the first million. From 1.5 to 2 million takes 5 more years. You just doubled your original million in 11 years total. From 2 million to 3 million, about 6 years. Same $1 million that took you 3 decades originally now takes 6 years. Each additional million becomes progressively faster. Not because you're contributing more, but because the base you're compounding from is enormous. Even modest percentage gains translate into massive absolute dollar amounts. Here's the part nobody talks about: the psychological battle. Your brain evolved over millions of years to prioritize immediate rewards. See food, eat food. See danger, run. This worked great on the African savanna 50,000 years ago. It works terribly in modern investing, where the optimal strategy is to do nothing for 30 years while numbers slowly compound on a screen. We're fighting our own neurobiology. Every day we choose to invest $500 instead of upgrading our apartment or buying a nicer car. The apartment upgrade provides immediate dopamine. Walking into a space that feels nicer, having friends over, and impressing them. These are tangible, immediate rewards. The $500 going into your brokerage provides exactly 0 immediate gratification. The number goes up by 500. That's it. No dopamine, no social validation, no sensory pleasure. This is why our culture celebrates the wrong things. We celebrate the promotion with the $10,000 raise, then immediately inflate lifestyle to match. We celebrate buying a house, then act shocked when 40% of take-home pay disappears into mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. We celebrate the new car, then lock ourselves into 5 years of payments that prevent investing. What we don't celebrate is the invisible millionaire, the person driving a 12-year-old sedan, living in the modest house, wearing the same clothes from 4 years ago. These people aren't depriving themselves. They figured out there's a massive difference between being rich and looking rich. And looking rich is expensive. Actually, being rich requires looking average for decades. I spend a lot of time reading SEC filings and earnings reports. It's boring work, but buried in these documents are the patterns. And one pattern shows up constantly. The ultra wealthy, the people with real generational wealth, they don't drive Lamborghinis. They drive 10-year-old Lexuses. They don't live in McMansions. They live in normal houses they bought in the 90s and never upgraded. They're not cheap. They're just optimizing for a different game. They're playing the compounding game, not the status game. Let me give you a concrete scenario. Meet Sarah, 32 years old, makes $75,000 a year as a project manager. She starts investing $500 a month. Her friend Jess, same age, same income, invests nothing but upgrades her lifestyle every time she gets a raise. By age 40, Sarah has about $70,000 invested. Jess has zero, but drives a nicer car and lives in a better apartment. They both feel like they're doing fine. By age 50, Sarah has $350,000. Jess still has zero, but her Instagram looks amazing. By age 60, Sarah has $800,000, and her contributions are now being dwarfed by market returns. She could semi-retire if she wanted. Jess is starting to panic because she's got maybe $60,000 in her 401k, and retirement is visible on the horizon. Here's the punchline. Both women made the same income their entire careers. The only difference was Sarah automated $500 a month before she could spend it, and Jess spent first and tried to save what was left over, which was always zero. Same income, radically different outcomes. The gap between them wasn't knowledge. Jess knew she should be investing. The gap was behavior. Sarah built a system that didn't rely on willpower. Jess relied on monthly discipline, which is a finite resource. Now you might be thinking, cool story, but I don't have $500 a month to invest. I'm paycheck to paycheck. Fair. 40% of Americans would struggle to cover a $400 emergency expense according to Federal Reserve data. If that's you, scale the strategy to your situation. Start with $50 a month, $25 a month. The specific number matters less than the habit and the automation. Investing $50 a month at 7% for 30 years gives you about $61,000. Not a million, but also not zero. And more importantly, it establishes the behavioral pattern. The person who builds the habit at $50 a month is far more likely to scale up to $500 when income grows than the person waiting until they can afford the bigger amount. But to be honest, if you're genuinely paycheck to paycheck with zero margin, the problem isn't primarily an investment problem. It's an income or expense problem. And solving that becomes priority one. Getting a roommate to cut housing costs, selling the finance car, and buying something cheap with cash. Cutting subscriptions, finding side income. These aren't fun solutions, but they're honest solutions. Building wealth requires margin. The gap between what you earn and spend has to be large enough to consistently invest. If that gap doesn't exist, create it by earning more or spending less, usually both. I've been running my own business for over 10 years now. I'm surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who taught me how money actually moves at the institutional level. I've got multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested myself. Skin in the game. And here's what I've learned. Most financial mistakes aren't math problems. They're brain problems. People understand compound interest intellectually, but can't execute behaviorally. They know what to do. They just can't maintain the behavior long enough for it to work because they're fighting cultural pressure, biological wiring, and their own impatience. The system is simple. Invest consistently in low-cost index funds. Don't time the market. Don't panic sell during crashes. Hold for decades. That strategy fits on a note card. But it's not easy. It requires watching friends buy new cars while you drive the same sedan. It requires scrolling social media, seeing vacation photos, resisting booking a trip you can't afford. It requires getting through market crashes where your portfolio drops 30% and every instinct is screaming at you to sell. It requires 30 years of consistency in a culture built on instant gratification. Let me tell you about another guy I know. Started investing in 2006. Put $500 a month into index funds like clockwork. 2008 hits. Market collapses. His portfolio drops 40%. He keeps contributing. Everyone tells him he's crazy, that the market will never recover, that this time is different. He ignores them and keeps buying. By 2010, market's recovering. By 2015, he's way ahead of where he would have been if he'd started in 2010. By 2020, he's got a 7-figure portfolio at age 53. The crash that terrified everyone else accelerated his wealth building because he understood the math and had the psychological fortitude to keep going. That's the real challenge. Not understanding the strategy, maintaining the discipline. Here's what helps. Automation. Set up automatic transfers the day after your paycheck hits. Make it impossible to spend the money because it's already gone. Treat investment contributions like rent, non-negotiable, not subject to monthly reconsideration based on how you feel or what you want to buy. Second, separate your self-worth from your consumption. Find identity and meaning in things other than what you own and display. This is hard work, harder than learning about Roth IRAs, because it requires confronting the stories you tell yourself about money, success, and what living a good life actually means. Most people never do this work. They coast through life reacting to financial pressures without developing a coherent philosophy about what they're building and why. They understand compound interest. They just can't resist the car upgrade, the bigger apartment, the vacation they can't afford. They break the compounding chain for temporary dopamine hits. And then they wake up at 55 with nothing and wonder what happened. Look, lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The data is overwhelming. Boring index funds, automated contributions, decades of patience. That's the formula. Not day trading, not chasing hot stocks, not gambling on the next meme coin, just ruthless consistency compounding over time while everyone else is chasing excitement. So here's your 3-step framework. First, automate everything. Don't rely on willpower. Build systems that move money before you can spend it. Second, accept that the first 100,000 is psychologically brutal and takes 7 to 9 years. You're building the snowball's core. It's supposed to feel slow. Don't quit during the foundation phase. Third, understand the inflection points. At 100,000, your returns start rivaling your contributions. At 650,000, you have real options and psychological freedom. At 1 million and beyond, exponential growth goes vertical, and each additional million happens faster than the last. The math works. 100 years of market data proves it works. The question is whether you can execute it. Whether you can resist every temptation, every social pressure, every moment of doubt for 30 years. Most people can't. Which is why the ones who do end up with everything